Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar on Application Support Outsourcing. And I'm sure many of you, when you saw that topic, might think that that's a fairly strange topic to be speaking about. If you look at IT organizations, they have to deal with fluctuating demand for services. And it's really not cost-effective for an IT organization to maintain a capability that meets all spikes in demands. So at some point in time, they have to consider outsourcing as a reasonable alternative in order to expand their capability by using vendor resources. Now, there are many different types of outsourcing, and there's many opinions about outsourcing, and discussing the different opinions about outsourcing is not really in the scope of our webinar this morning. But at one extreme, you have companies who outsource their entire IT functions to large companies such as IBM or HP. That's a very strategic decision, which basically says that I'm now going to turn over all of my IT management to a vendor, and I'm going to trust that vendor to deliver the capabilities I need. At the other extreme, they deploy individual vendors, individual consultants with selected skills, and that is also a form of outsourcing, even if it's just one person. Now, the topic of this webinar is outsourcing application support. But that is not commonly considered as an option, and the main reason is because it tends to be viewed as being risky. Now, what I hope to convey to you during this presentation is that there are benefits to outsourcing application support, both to your own internal organization and your staff, and also provide some suggestions that will help you ensure success. Let's talk a little bit about application support internally within an IT organization. The traditional approach has some common challenges associated with it. And I'm sure most of you, if you're involved with the application support function at all, will recognize some of these challenges. Generally speaking, what IT organizations do is they deploy a team of dedicated staff, and by dedicated, I mean they are not shared in other projects or in other areas. I'm sure they're all dedicated from a professional perspective. And this team has specialized knowledge, technical knowledge, application knowledge, and business process knowledge that enables them to support the applications that they're assigned to support. Now, that knowledge, unfortunately, is typically undocumented, and once it's undocumented, it means it's also difficult to share. What that does then is that makes load balancing and adjusting spikes in demand very difficult as well. So if I have two experts in one system, but they know the payroll system, but they don't know the accounting system, and they're underutilized, I can't share them with the other area because it takes too long for them to learn what they need to know. The other common problem that we find with many support organizations is that they don't really have mature support management processes. Most of the processes are typically informal, or they're team-specific, or in some cases they're non-existent. The other problem that leads to is that not only are there no processes, but there aren't really good management tools. So many of the support activities are not logged, which means that management has limited visibility and control. Those are the two words that we like to use on what is actually happening. And as a result, it is very difficult for them to manage support. The other issue with support is that a project might last 6 months or a year, but support goes on for 5, 10, 15 years. So as a percentage of the total budget, it actually represents a very high cost to the organization, and represents a higher degree of risk because those existing applications are the applications who are actually providing the functions that are being used by the business. After all, an application that's in development isn't supporting anybody yet because it's not in production. The other major support challenge is the fact that many of these support teams have a tendency to become reactive to the crisis of the day that the business wants support in, and they're not really proactive. So it makes it very difficult to manage in that kind of an environment. Well, let's talk a little bit about what are the impacts from having that kind of support organization. Now, keep in mind, once again, I'm not talking about what it should look like if you outsource it. I'm just talking about what the common challenges are internally in support and why outsourcing support is viewed as risky. So based on the common management scenario I discussed earlier, there is a difficulty in sharing knowledge, which means that you depend on the experts that you have assigned to the team, and it makes it very difficult to share those experts or have them help out in other areas. This dependence on experts means that they wind up with long-term assignments. So, once you're an expert in a particular application, you tend to get stuck in that area, and that tends to limit opportunity. It limits career growth, and if you spend all of your time in one area, it tends to limit new ideas and continuous improvement, because as people move around and they learn a new area, they come up with new ways of doing things. The knowledgeable experts are deployed to support, and as a result, they're not available to assist with strategic projects. Well, why is that a problem? Well, if you think about it, strategic projects are usually trying to build some new capability that supports current business processes, and the people who know the most about the current business processes are the ones who support the applications today. So it would be very beneficial if we could take those people who know the existing business processes and systems and make them available to ERP projects or new development projects, but that's not very practical in the common way of managing support. Another major issue is the loss of one of these experts dramatically affects the support team because there's no backup for them. This is going to become a very big problem over the next few years because many of the people who support these applications are approaching retirement. So like it or not, they will be leaving, and at some point in time we're going to have to address the impact of their knowledge loss and how we're going to transfer that to other people. There's another issue that some people don't really stop and think about, but if a person is supporting an application for years, they develop personal relationships with business users. And as a result, what they do is they will do favors for their business units. We call that black market services. They deliver work and provide favors, I guess, if that is really unknown to management. The last couple things are related to visibility and control. If you're not logging the request, you're not logging the priority, you're not logging the business value, it's very difficult to prioritize, and you're not necessarily working on the things that provide the most value to the business. And finally, as I mentioned before, support costs are a significant cost to the IT organization, and they are necessary because they have to keep the applications running. But keep in mind that every dollar spent on fixing a problem in an application is not providing strategic value. It's basically keeping the status quo running. So there should be support management should also include some kind of a mechanism to reduce the total cost of support, reduce the need for support, fix recurring problems and things like that, so that that budget and those resources can be deployed in areas where there is more value. Well, if that's the case, then, and I mentioned before that most IT organizations wind up having to utilize vendors in some capacity because they don't have the staff size to deal with all of the spikes in work. How do they use vendors? Well, in many cases, what they will do is they will bring one or two vendor consultants in, and they will supplement an existing customer team. The problem is that if you do that long term, you run into co-employment issues and other things like that, and you're mixing your own internal teams with vendor staff, and it creates management challenges. And also, it's very difficult to have the vendor or the vendor staff be accountable, because in that case, they're really being managed by your own management team. The